This is your daily dose of all things royal.
CNN breaking news.
This breaking news, former President Joe Biden has just announced that he has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer.
Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. A lot going on here in the United States of America. One of that being the announcement of Joe Biden announcing he had cancer. This is after a slew of posts that Donald Trump had posted on his Truth Social, giving some indication that something is going on. Like right before Joe Biden announced he had terminal cancer, President Trump drops this post about Obama. And then the day before, he drops this post about Hillary Clinton.
Remember John F. Kennedy Jr.? He was declared the frontrunner for the New York Senate seat back in 1999. Days later, his plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, and his rival, Hillary Clinton, was elected senator. Mary Mahoney was a Clinton White House intern. She knew enough of the inner workings of Bill's sexual advancements to be a star witness during the Clinton impeachment trials. She was brutally executed at a Starbucks she was managing in 1997. In 1993, White House counsel Vince Foster was found dead in Fort Marcy Park near D.C. He supposedly killed himself, and among a lengthy list of potential foul play, the bullet was never found.
Then there's James McDougal, a key witness for White House prosecutors. He was serving his 3-year sentence for bank fraud at the Fort Worth Federal Medical Center in Texas. And just before he was to give a testimony before the grand jury, McDougal suffered a heart attack in solitary confinement.
In 2015, Walter Scheib, a White House chef hired under Bill Clinton, joined the list. His body was found at the bottom of a river, nearly 2 miles from the base of the trail he was reportedly hiking. An autopsy determined that Scheib's death was accidental drowning, but he might have known too much. 27-year-old Democratic National Committee staffer Seth Rich was shot and killed in D.C. this year. There is speculation that he was the source of the controversial leaked emails allegedly sent by DNC staffers, and that he may have been murdered in retaliation. Then Sean Lucas, the lead attorney in a fraud case against the DNC, was found lying on the bathroom floor by his girlfriend when she returned home on August 2nd. His death was reported classified, pending the results of an autopsy.
Now, I don't know where Trump is going with those posts or what he was implying there. However, it did get me thinking about Harry and Meghan's involvement with not only Obama, but also with the Clintons, especially with Meghan Markle. Now, we know that Harry and Meghan support the Clinton Global Initiative and have seen them with Chelsea Clinton, as well as with the UN, and doing all the evil globalist stuff. Which brings me back to the early days on when Harry and Meghan hired Sarah Latham. Now, for those that don't know, Sarah Latham worked for both Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and I do believe that she was the lead strategist on the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign in 2016. She also was John Podesta's right-hand man or woman. You know, I've always wondered why more people don't talk about how suspicious it was that Hillary Clinton showed up at Frogmore in November of 2019, right before Harry and Meghan decided to come over to the United States to help the Biden campaign under the guise of so-called Megxit. What exactly was Sarah Latham's role? Nobody really talks about what she did with the couple in that short window of time. Was it helping the couple get ready to come over here? Somehow I feel like it's all connected, because what we are slowly realizing or waking up to is seeing that whoever had been running this country for the past 4 years was definitely not Joe Biden. And these globalists did everything that they could in 2020 to ensure that Donald Trump would not get back into office because it put a wrench in their globalist plans. And it's a fact, Harry and Meghan played a role in that. And the role that I'm talking about is interfering with the 2020 election. Quite a few people from the UK were involved with interfering with our election, like Labour operative Imran Ahmed from the CCDH and Christopher Steele, who created that dossier, which ties back to none other than the DNC and Hillary Clinton. Now, in my quest to finding out more about Sarah Latham, I stumbled upon a gentleman by the name of Buzz Patterson. So who is this guy? Well, Robert Buzz Patterson is a retired United States Air Force lieutenant colonel who was the senior military aide to President Bill Clinton, responsible for the so-called nuclear football, which was the satchel containing nuclear launch codes. He also had commanded military units assigned to the White House, including Air Force One and Marine One. He's also the author of this New York Times bestseller that was released in 2004 titled Dereliction of Duty, which contains firsthand witness accounts of how Bill Clinton compromised America's national security. Now, on Buzz Patterson's X page, he does drop a few of these stories that were mentioned in this book that are quite frankly jaw-dropping, but it does give you an insight into the minds of these psychopaths. And it makes total sense as to how Harry and Meghan got wrapped up with the Clintons because, as the saying goes, birds of a feather definitely flock together. Get comfy because it's story time. Here are a couple of Buzz Patterson's posts. In early January 1997, the Clintons and entourage, including me, were going to St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, for a presidential vacation. This is the infamous trip where Bill and Hill were filmed dancing on the beach. The trip had been planned for weeks, and most of the logistics were set. But as soon as Air Force One touched down in St. Thomas, I knew something was amiss. Mrs. Clinton was very visibly upset. She went off on her immediate staff, essentially screwing herself into the top of the aircraft. Loud four-letter words were bouncing around the fuselage. I approached to get involved and help. Always a dicey proposition with Hillary. Into the breach I went once more. The staff quickly learned that Chelsea, a senior in high school, had left her backpack full of textbooks in the hotel room in Hilton Head, South Carolina, where the Clintons had been attending their annual Renaissance weekend, a gathering of Democrat government, business media, and academic leaders. But it wasn't Chelsea's fault, of course, because, according to Hillary, it was everybody else's fault except for Chelsea. Hillary was specifically hell-bent on blaming the president's valets, which was sad and unfair. The president is served by career Navy enlisted men as valets. These valets, Filipino by birth, have a long, proud tradition of serving the first family in the White House going back at least to 1909. In my experience, they were loyal, devoted, impeccable employees. They worked diligently to attend every detail, no matter how small. But right now, Hillary had them squarely in her gun sights. It seemed to me amazing that the idea of holding Chelsea responsible, Chelsea would soon be a freshman at Stanford, never crossed Hillary's mind. Kelly Craighead, Hillary's personal aide, asked me to find a way to get the books down to St. Thomas, chute suite. Chelsea had finals approaching and needed to study. We sprang into Hillary crisis mode. I called back to Hilton Head, catching my fellow military aide before she caught her return flight to D.C. She sounded the alarm, gathered remaining White House staffers, and scurried to find the backpack. Once the backpack was safely in hand, we dispatched one of the president's valets via commercial airliner to deliver the goods. He landed and brought them directly to the home the Clintons were staying in. The books were on Chelsea's bedside table before she woke up. Just another day in the Clinton White House. The quick assignment of blame and a relatively minor issue mushrooming quickly out of control. Just another day living with Hillary Clinton. In regards to Bill Clinton, here's a story that you won't forget. He writes, "We were returning late one night from a long trip to Europe on Air Force One, landed at Andrews, and helicoptered on Marine One to the White House. We landed on the South Lawn at about midnight, and after ensuring the president was on his way to his residence upstairs, I headed to my bedroom in the East Wing. Shortly thereafter, my phone rang, and it was the Air Force One presidential pilot. 'Buzz, we have a problem,' he said. 'Oh shit,' I thought. Apparently, Clinton had cornered a female Air Force One steward in the gallery and molested her. She was young, a staff sergeant, and married with children. I knew her, liked her, and she was super sweet. Now she was in tears. I asked the pilot what she wanted. He told me that she didn't want to be another so-called bimbo. She wanted to remain in the Air Force and be promotable. All she wanted was an apology. In the world of Monica Lewinsky, Paula Jones, and Kathleen Wiley, this wasn't surprising to me. It was, however, terribly disappointing and sad. So that morning, as a young major, I had to walk to the Oval Office and tell the commander-in-chief that he needed to apologize to the young lady. I've been shot at with hot metal, but this was the toughest day in my life. I remember on my way to talk with him thinking, I didn't sign up for this shit. 2 weeks later, we got the two together on board Air Force One in the president's office, and he offered a very uncontrite half apology. He didn't care. This next post is a story about Hillary. He writes, as some of you know, I was the Air Force military aide for Bill Clinton, lived in the White House, traveled everywhere they traveled, and carried the nuclear football. As such, I was always in close proximity to both Bill and Hill. Among the military who served in the White House and the professional White House staff, the Clinton administration was infamously known for its lack of professionalism and courtesy, though few ever spoke about it. But when it came to rudeness, it was Hillary Clinton who was the most feared person in the administration. She set the tone from the very first day in my assignment. When I first arrived to work in the White House, my predecessor warned me, you can get away with pissing off Bill, but if you make her mad, she'll rip your heart out. I heeded those words. I did make him mad a few times, but I never really pissed her off. I knew the ramifications. I learned very quickly that the administration's day-to-day character, whether inside or outside of D.C., depended solely on the presence or absence of Hillary. Her reputation preceded her. We used to say that when Hillary was gone, it was a frat party. When she was home, it was Schindler's List. In my first few days on the job, and I remember I essentially lived there, I realized there were different rules for Hillary. She instructed the senior staff, including me, that she didn't want to be forced to encounter us. We were instructed that whenever Mrs. Clinton is moving through the halls, be as inconspicuous as possible. She did not want to see staff and be forced to interact with anyone, no matter their position in the building. Many a time, I'd see mature, professional adults working in the most important building in the world scurrying into office doorways to escape Hillary's line of sight. I'd hear whispering, she's coming, she's coming. I could be walking down a West Wing hallway midday, busier than hell, people doing the administration's work, whether in the press office, medical unit, wherever. She'd walk in and they'd scatter. She was the Nazi schoolmarm, and the rest of us were expected to hide as though we were kids in trouble. I wasn't a kid. I was a professional officer and pilot. I said, I'm not doing that. There was also a period of time when she attempted to ban military uniforms in the White House. It was the re-election year of 1996, and she was trying to craft the narrative that the military was not a priority in the Clinton administration. As a military aide carrying the football and working closely with the Secret Service, I objected to that. It simply wasn't a matter of her political agenda. It was national security. If the balloon went up, the Secret Service would need to find me as quickly as possible. Seconds matter. Finding the aide in military uniform made complete sense. Besides, what commander-in-chief wouldn't want to advertise his leadership and command? She finally relented because the Secret Service weighed in. The Clintons are corrupt beyond words. Hillary is evil, vindictive, and profane. Hillary is a bitch. Now, this next story about Bill Clinton is a doozy. He writes, I've been posting a lot about Hillary Clinton. Let's spend some time with Bill, shall we? As the Air Force military aide and carrier of the nuclear football, the other aides and I lived and worked in the White House. One morning, I was the first person on President Clinton's calendar. I was scheduled to brief the president on the nuclear process and answer any questions he might have. I arrived at 7 a.m. before the rest of the Oval Office was at work. It also happened to be the same morning that the Monica Lewinsky affair hit the national press. As I walked by his secretary's desk in the outer area of the Oval, I noticed the headlines of the Washington Post. I knew he had been caught. I walked into the Oval and found the president with his head in his hands, bloodshot eyes. He knew he'd been caught too. I said, "Sir, if this is a bad time, I can come back later for the briefing." He agreed. I said, "Just one more thing. Could I just authenticate that you have the nuclear codes?" We called the codes the biscuit because the president would tear it open. The president carries the codes. The aide carries the football. He told me that no, he didn't have them. He didn't know where they were. I asked him how long they'd been misplaced. He couldn't remember. I was floored. It never happened before. Instead of concern for the missing top secret document, he simply said, "Please don't let this get out." His only concern was his impending impeachment, Monica, and his poll numbers. I gave the Pentagon a heads up, and they were incredulous. We conducted an extensive search of the White House and the residence, never found them. The Pentagon hopped to and created a new set that was quickly disseminated across the U.S. nuclear arsenal. No easy task. They brought a new set the next morning. Bill Clinton lost the nuclear codes. For an undetermined period of time, our commander-in-chief didn't have the ability to launch nuclear weapons. He never informed us. He had Monica on his mind. Dereliction of duty. Here's one more story about Hillary Clinton that's pretty bad. He writes, as we discussed in a previous edition of Bedtime Stories, the military aide and the football accompanied the president at all times. In the late 1990s, I was the Air Force military aide assigned to the White House. I had an office and a bedroom in the East Wing and attended all events with the president when on duty. On this particular night, we were on our way from the White House to a local D.C. hotel for a fundraising event. Hillary was along for the ride because it involved raising money, of course. My vehicle in the motorcade was typically the one immediately behind the president and First Lady's limousine. It's called the control van. As the motorcade pulled into the hotel loading dock area, I knew it was going to be a long night as soon as I noticed the Clintons yelling at each other back and forth in the limo. It was heated. They were very animated and arguing in the back seat and taking their time. Finally, they emerged from the beast. After a very pregnant pause, the president, the first lady, two Secret Service agents, the White House doctor, and I crowded into the loading dock elevator on our way to the party on the top floor of the hotel. We typically use loading docks for security reasons. I immediately realized Mrs. Clinton had just received some bad news about the ongoing Whitewater investigation, and she was being denied immunity from testimony by Attorney General Janet Reno. Hillary was apoplectic, and she was blaming her husband. As soon as the elevator doors closed, she exploded at the president, spewing four-letter words like a machine gun. Every vulgar word you've ever heard, and I've heard them all as a vet, poured from her mouth. "God damn it, you bastard! It's your fucking fault!" Beak to beak, finger pointed, the whole nine. And she went on and on and on. I noticed the alarmed glances of the agents and the doctor, and we exchanged oh shit side glances. We were along for the ride. I and the football tried to blend into the walls of the elevator to avoid any collateral damage. The agents seemed concerned. Bill looked like a beaten puppy. He simply put his head down and said, "Yes, I understand. Yes, dear, I know." The president, embarrassed, placated her as best as he could between the volleys of expletives. He knew better than to fight back. Once we reached the top floor of the hotel complex, the elevator doors opened onto a crowded hallway for our arrival. Immediately, Bill and Hillary clasped hands, pulled out the fake smiles, and waved in unison. Typical Clintons. Same old bullshit. The agents, the doctor and I, just looked at each other and sighed. Now, there are many more stories on this guy's X page, but the reason why I just chose a few to read out to you is to show you how similar Hillary and Meghan are when it comes to how they treat their staff and how nasty they can be, especially with their own spouse. I have no doubt in my mind that Harry has had those moments Bill Clinton has had where he gets his ear chewed off with Meghan swearing and cursing and carrying on. No doubt in my mind. So now you can understand why Meghan and Harry hang around the Clintons so much. They're equally as vile and disgusting as the Clintons are. So now let me go ahead and close off this video with this last post that pretty much summarizes who these progressive, nasty liberals are. And he writes, Democrats and the military. When I was tapped to accompany President Bill Clinton and carry the nuclear football, which contains the top secret codes, among other things, the president needs in case of nuclear war, I was proud and grateful. As a career Air Force officer and pilot, I'd literally served around the globe operating in and out of 70 countries, and I'd flown combat missions in Grenada, the Persian Gulf, Rwanda, Somalia, Haiti, and Bosnia. I was honored to assume this new and awesome responsibility. But my experiences in the Clinton White House turned my gratitude and awe into shock, revulsion, and sorrow, as I saw firsthand the careless and utterly selfish way in which Clinton and his administration ran our country. It wasn't nation first, it was politics first, and our military and our national security suffered. So retired and out of uniform, I wrote Dereliction of Duty, documenting our former president's contempt for the military, his indifference to important issues except insofar as they served his own political or personal purposes, and his failure to accept his responsibilities as our commander-in-chief. I walked out of the Clinton White House on my last day in the spring of 1998. I had personal experience with Clinton's many missteps on several fronts militarily, including our failure to remove Osama bin Laden prior to that terrorist attack on U.S. soil on 9/11, and the very palpable disdain military members had for their commander. There's an inviolable tenet in the military, and everybody gets it. You can't demand respect, you have to earn it. In my personal case, I was renewed and re-bluing, heading back to my service as a pilot and a commander. I was privileged to serve as a commander at the United States Air Force Academy, where I could lead aspiring young officer candidates. After retirement, I penned my first book as a clarion call to all Americans. When we vote for a president, we vote for a military leader. We failed miserably with Bill Clinton. The Biden administration was no different, perhaps even worse. History repeated itself in the presidency of Joe Biden. Only this time, the misconduct of Biden and his woke cronies in the Pentagon led to the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan, directly leading to Americans needlessly dying and the delivery of millions of dollars of American military weapons to the Taliban, our enemy. Concurrently, the Biden administration also played dangerous games with social engineering in our forces, prioritizing equity over capability, positioning notions that the greatest threat globally to our troops was climate change, and sending millions of dollars of U.S. military arms and equipment to Ukraine, which likely bought cover for his and his son's financial involvement. Our stature on the world stage was appropriately cast as our leader falling upstairs and falling off bikes. Our nation cannot abide fools in leadership. Yet there we were again. From my point of view, as a military veteran and analyst, it seems the unifying theme of Democrat presidents Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and recently Biden is a consistent underestimating of foreign policy dangers and an undermining of military capabilities for purely political reasons. Military units rely on meritocracy and adding value to capabilities and logistics. As with previous Democrat presidents, that tenet didn't trend with Biden. Fortunately, in what can only be described as divine intervention, we now have Donald Trump as our commander-in-chief and Pete Hegseth as our Secretary of Defense. Lots of damage has been done. Let's fix it. And on that note, I think it's time that the chickens are going to come home to roost and people are going to start to be held accountable. And I think, hopefully, this is what Donald Trump has been alluding to with posting those posts that I showed you in the very beginning, which likely Harry and Meghan are equally going to go down as well because of their association and their involvement with some of the things that these very same people have been involved with, if you know what I mean. Harry and Meghan are very much a part of the swamp. Make no mistake about it. Now, because of Buzz Patterson's intimate involvement with the Clintons, I did reach out to see if he had any type of insight as to what this relationship could have been about, as well as any information he might have had and experience with Sarah Latham, just for us to sort of fill in some more gaps. We'll see if he gets back to me. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.